A third and final round of talks between the US and China is due to begin within hours. The first sessions have been described as fiery, but despite the sparring, there is word of some progress. For a closer look, we're joined by Ross Feingold. He's Director of Business Development at the SafePro Group. Ross, a rough start to the talks, to say the least. Is this likely to continue for day two?
Sure. There's unlikely to be a change in the tone of the wording used by both sides, and unlikely to be an environmental change either. So I would expect the second day, however short or long it will turn out to be, to also have this kind of tension. And I think the American side, when the meetings conclude and they meet the media, or when they return to Washington, D.C., I think their comments will reflect that. They're going to reflect that there was just simply no room for much progress, but that the United States made its positions very clear. I think that's kind of the tone or the key message we're going to see from Secretary of State Blinken and National Security Advisor Sullivan. The interesting thing there, though, is that going to be enough for the people they need to answer to in the United States, whether that's media, foreign policy experts who are looking at China issues, and of course, members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, who really do have high expectations for a tough on China, not just words, but a set of policies from the Biden administration. So whether or not this meeting will actually satisfy all the constituencies remains to be seen.
Well, if this is sort of a scene-setting kind of exercise, as you know, the first time they're sort of coming together with the new Biden administration, where do you see there being possible room for consensus?
Well, the obvious issues are the ones that Biden himself identified during the course of the presidential campaign in 2020. And those are multilateral issues like climate change, where Biden wants to go back into the Paris Climate Accord. He'll have to work with China on that if any progress is to be made out of the accord. The Iran nuclear agreement, again, Biden very clear, he wants to be in the agreement. You would need China's cooperation. North Korea is another possible one, but we know from many years' experience that hoping that China will cooperate with the U.S. doesn't really or necessarily result in substantive action by North Korea. So there's this limited set of issues that Biden, maybe in the context of multilateralism, hopes that he could work with China, or his team hopes that they could work with China. Obviously, we didn't see much of that today because the United States was emphasizing these areas of very clear differences, such as Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber espionage. Obviously, the Chinese side pushed back on all of the issues raised by the U.S. And of course, the Chinese side was not going to say, yes, you're right, Secretary Blinken, we agree with you and we're going to change our policies.
Well, those areas of conflict, such as Hong Kong and Taiwan and Xinjiang that you mentioned, it does appear that a lot of that comes because they have opposing values on these two sides. So is there common ground?
No, not really. I mean, the common ground might simply be that they'll just continue to do what they're doing. What I mean is, we just saw another round of U.S. sanctions against officials from either the Chinese central government or the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government with regard to recent changes to the electoral or proposed changes to the electoral system in Hong Kong. And it's not the first wave of sanctions that the U.S. has issued. There'll be more sanctions on officials involved in Hong Kong policymaking. But that doesn't change what the Hong Kong government or the central government in Beijing is doing with regard to Hong Kong. So, and similar with Xinjiang, the U.S. issued sanctions on Chinese officials, has banned certain products manufactured in Xinjiang from entering the United States. There'll probably be more of that. Again, it doesn't change the trajectory of Chinese policies. So, in a way, we have this odd consensus where each side does what it's going to do, but it doesn't really change what or bring about the change that the other side wants. The U.S. is not going to stop issuing sanctions, and conversely, China is not going to change its policies in those regions.
Well, thank you for your thoughts this evening. Ross Feingold, Director of Business Development at the SafePro Group.